Hello, this is Tammy Cromer Campbell coming to you from TCC Photo Gallery in downtown Longview, Texas at 207 North Center Street and on the web at tccphotogallery.com. I'd like to thank you for being here today. Today's podcast is about remembering the Space Shuttle Columbia, and I have invited some photographers and picture editors to be on the phone call with me today. And so we have Dr. Scott Lieberman. Dr. Scott Lieberman is a cardiologist and a photographer, person interested in photography and space, and his picture ended up on the covers of many magazines around the country. And there is also Bob Daugherty, was named the first director of the newly created AP State Photo Center in Washington, D.C. And then we also have Rufus Lovett, who is a photography teacher, an author, and he covered the Columbia event for the Texas Monthly. And there's myself, Tammy Cromer Campbell, who is an author, photographer, and I covered the event for the Houston Chronicle. And we have Catherine McIntosh also on the call, and she is the picture editor from the Houston Chronicle. Thank you so much for being here. I guess we'll get started. On February 1st, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia fragmented over East Texas. I want to hand this on over to Bob Daugherty.
It was a Saturday morning. I remember it very clearly, and I happened to have the television on. And I was not at the office, obviously. It was announced at some point that it was so many seconds late landing or arriving in Florida, at which point I knew that if it was a few seconds late, that it was not arriving in Florida. So I immediately headed for the office. You know, we hear a lot about citizen journalism these days. It's kind of the latest buzz in newspapers and television and so forth. And this probably, Scott Lieberman and his images that day took citizen journalism to a whole new high. And may have even been the catalyst that got citizen journalism going as the buzzword. I was at the office within the hour. Not long later, I was told I should contact the editor of the newspaper down in Tyler. I spoke to the managing editor there, told him I understood that there were images made and that they had and made by an amateur. Sorry, Scott, didn't mean to degrade you there. And he mentioned that, yes, indeed, Scott Lieberman was the person who made them. And I said, well, can you tell me how to get in touch with him? And he said, he's right here. By that time, I got Scott on the phone. He obviously had other calls coming in from different publications, magazines especially. He said he had 8 images, 8 frames. And I had chatted with Scott, and his said to me that more than anything, he thought it was a very historic occasion, and he wanted to make sure that the images got the widest possible dissemination. I told him that the AP could certainly guarantee that. And we soon came to an agreement that AP would be the exclusive distributor of his images. It was probably a negotiation of about 3 minutes, and neither of us have looked back since. We've become very good friends. I must say that although Scott is considered an amateur, all you have to do is look in the AP archive and see the images he made is probably as late as yesterday. He still continues to put out quality images. The images that Scott made, I said at the time, it was the widest played image of all time on next day front pages. It was unbelievable how far they got. We can all remember the Rosenthal picture, and you say, oh, wow, look at that, flag raising on Iwo Jima, look how far that went, how much use it got. Yeah, it was a scratchy radio photo that got into some U.S. newspapers, but you got to remember that But the onlines and so forth now, and the digital distribution of the images, that this picture of the breakup of the shuttle over Texas had to be the most single-played image spot of all time, and still remains that way.
Well, thank you so much, Bob. Dr. Lieberman, what would you like to add to that?
Sorry, took a second to unmute there. Well, thank you, Bob. That's I'm flattered. It was a heart-wrenching day. You know, I've been a fan of the space program my entire life. I had made a point of taking my daughter to space camp some years earlier. I had my son out there with my wife, and we were waiting for the arrival of the space shuttle when we were taking both video pictures as well as still pictures, kind of breaking in a new digital still camera I had at the time. It was in 2003, 6 megapixel was a large file. It was kind of maybe a turning point for digital photography, in that the larger format single lens reflexes were just really starting to come online and be more available. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to take a picture that would sit on the fireplace or in the mantle, or at least have something I could show people to show how spectacular a re-entry looked over Texas. We had seen one in a nighttime before, and I was kind of braced for a pretty graphical image of what is really a spectacular display of technology. Of course, as we all know, it ended up being a heart-wrenching moment in American history and in space history. And as soon as I saw the pictures, my first goal really was to get them to the Tyler Morning Telegraph. I can honestly say, after I was aware of what I had as far as the pictures went, I thought that the Tyler Morning Telegraph would run them. I really didn't quite start imagining on the global scale that the Tyler Morning Telegraph and the Associated Press would afford those images. And one of the things I've always been so amazed at is by and large, newspaper layout and design is a human effort. It's an activity that's done by editors deciding what's most important for their particular market, for their people, to tell the story of the news of the day and it has always astounded me that on that day, across international boundaries, in multiple cultures, in hundreds of countries, on probably over 1,400 newspapers, that photo editors from around the world use this series of photos to tell the story of that tragedy that day. It was a heart-wrenching moment, and the response to those pictures was equally almost amazing to me to see that in play. It was an amazing weekend. It was a horrible event, but it was incredible to see these images be so useful to so many people around the world. The Associated Press also has had a wonderful collection of pictures of people reacting to the news. We have photographs of people reading the newspaper outside the Coliseum, around the Taj Mahal, people looking at those images through, of course, in Israel because of the Israeli astronaut. Mm-hmm. Those pictures were in just about every culture in every corner of the world that day.
Well, thank you so much for letting me show those pictures here at the gallery, and I guess our next speaker is Catherine McIntosh.
Yes, hi. This is Catherine McIntosh. I'm a photo editor with the Houston Chronicle, and for many years was the art director for Texas Magazine. As an editor, I first heard about the Columbia explosion on the radio. It was a weekend, I believe, and I rushed into the office. It was kind of an all-hands-on-deck coverage. We had photographers rushing up there, wire services, and of course we had Dr. Lieberman's photos that I'm pretty sure we used those on our front page, as along with pictures from the ground. People were running around shooting pictures of debris that had fallen, anything they could find about people, but mainly it was chasing where debris had fallen here or there.